Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Nelson, here on this Wednesday afternoon. Still a rather hectic week, still finals week for a lot of college students. Good luck with that. I have to take a final tomorrow. And that also, you know what, I might as well bring it up now. I will not be going live tomorrow, but instead I'm going to be uploading my segments at the usual time instead of just going live. So I have a test that happens at like 1 o'clock, and I absolutely cannot miss it. If I miss it, then I fail, and I do not want to fail. And I'm sure most of you guys can understand why I won't be able to make it. But I can make it today, and in today's segment, we are going to be talking about the trade rumors, specifically regarding Golden State and the possibility of them getting Jimmy Butler or LeBron James, because those are starting to stir up at the moment. Then in the second segment, we're going to talk about the NBA quarterfinal games in the NBA Cup that took place yesterday. It was a lot of good games, and I really liked watching them, so we're going to talk about that. And then in the third segment, we're going to talk about Chris Paul passing Jason Kidd in all-time assists. See what I did there? Passing. We're going to talk about that, talk about Chris Paul once again. And then in the fourth segment, we're going to be doing some predictions for tonight's NBA quarterfinals matchups. So more or less, everything is going to be about NBA today. More or less, everything's going to be about basketball. So we also have a special fifth segment at the end of the fourth segment that isn't basketball, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, or something that you're just dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $sign below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, then that's totally fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment, GSMCpodcast.net, to send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really help the show, and either or make it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. You can see it under the ticker right now. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into these trade rumors. So as you guys know, Golden State, I don't know what it is with them. Their GM, their drafting, their signings, their free agent signings, their trading, everything about them and the organization just somehow goes the right way. They were able to land Steph Curry in the draft after Minnesota had back-to-back first-round picks, top 10 picks, by the way, and they completely passed on Steph Curry. And, that totally must sting for a lot of Minnesota fans. I mean, maybe not so much right now because they're a solid team, at least way more solid than what they were in years prior. But and not only that, they were also able to get Klay Thompson and Draymond Green in the draft. They were also able to sign Kevin Durant in free agency without breaking any sort of salary cap rules and without their signing even getting vetoed. If you guys are old school, then you probably remember when Chris Paul was supposed to get traded over to the Lakers, but the commissioner at the time, Stern, ended up vetoing the trade so that it wouldn't go through because, let's face it, if Chris Paul played with Kobe Bryant, that would be game over for a lot of teams, and he understood that. But, of course, the Warriors, they were able to get lucky and get Kevin Durant. Now it seems like they're getting even more, they're trying to get even more greedy with the luck that they've had and try and get Jimmy Butler. So as of right now, the Golden State Warriors, they're 14-9 in around a quarter of the way through the season. They're 4.5 games behind the best team in the Western Conference and 2.5 games ahead of San Antonio. And they're currently on the outside of the playoffs. Again, Western Conference is much, much closer than the Eastern Conference in terms of playoff race right about now. So there's obvious room for improvement. And the Warriors, with the roster that they had, deep down, they've known that they did not have the ability to continue playing as strong as they were for the entirety of the season. So they're trying to get better. And they're looking for stars and all-star talent, particularly with Jimmy Butler and LeBron James. And I'm sure Draymond Green is so happy, and he would be so happy with LeBron James joining his team. Because as we know, Draymond Green, he gives LeBron all the credit in the world. He thinks that LeBron is the greatest basketball player of all time because he is smart. And he also, like, you could just tell, he loves being friends with LeBron. But we're gonna talk about the Jimmy Butler side first, because I feel like that's a little bit more of a realistic trade that they could possibly pull off, as opposed to trading for LeBron. As I said before, the in my segment talking about things that this NBA season has proven so far, I believe it was the first part where I mentioned the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat have had the same top 3 players on their team for the last 5 years, and they have nothing to show for it. And I think, personally, I think it would be about time for them to actually, like, they should have traded and probably improved the roster a little bit better than just sticking with those 3 guys. Not saying that those 3 guys are bad, but we've already seen that they do not have the ability to win a championship. So, and there have been several other teams that have tried and improved. I mean, we saw the Boston Celtics. That's the most recent example that I can really give you guys, because, I mean, the Boston Celtics, despite constantly making it to the Eastern Conference Finals and just being one step away from, like, winning it all at one point against Golden State, they looked to improve their roster, and they ended up adding Kristaps Porzingis to an already competent roster, and not to mention them adding Drew Holiday as well. So they've shown that they're willing to sacrifice some of their long-term players just for improvement. And this the Miami Heat have somewhat done the exact opposite. But as of right now, Jimmy Butler, he's averaging only 19 points per game for the Miami Heat, and they are the 5th seed in an incredibly weak Eastern Conference. Butler has played 17 of Miami's 22 games so far this season, which puts him on pace to appear at the range of either 52 or 65 games played this season. He's played around this number every single year since leaving Chicago. And there have been rumors that Butler and the Heat are preparing to move on, especially after this season. And, you know, considering Jimmy Butler's antics, it doesn't really seem like the relationship between the two, between the franchise and Jimmy Butler, is looking all that strong. So that's why I think, like, you know, this trade is a little bit more realistic. The LeBron trade is a little bit more questionable, in my opinion. Like, obviously, LeBron would be a much better asset to the team than Jimmy Butler. No questions, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's only missed 1 game, but the Lakers have lost 7 of their last 10. And he also has a no-trade clause. But if he wants to reunite with Steph, you know, his Olympic buddy, the guy that he won the gold medal with in the previous year, Steve Kerr is most likely he could most definitely make that happen. And the Warriors reportedly asked about LeBron last season, but they were shut down by the Lakers. And it's like, this duo between Steph and LeBron would probably break the internet. And, like, just imagine, like, the fandom, like, Steph Curry fans and LeBron fans, now they have to coexist with each other. Like, it sounds so out of nowhere, and it sounds so out of the blue. Like, I could, as a LeBron fan, I am a fan of Steph Curry. I really appreciate Steph Curry's game, but it's like, now it's like you have to really be a fan of them if you're going to be either LeBron or a Steph Curry fan. And I know Steph Curry fans, they're going to feel way more bitter about being fans of LeBron than LeBron fans are going to be bitter about being fans with Steph Curry, because, you know, Steph Curry fans, they love to believe that LeBron James Steph Curry is better than LeBron James. And I'm sorry, Steph fans, but he'll never be better than LeBron, no matter how badly you want him to be. And if the Warriors can somehow land either of these players, it won't necessarily make them favorites to win a title, because as we've seen in the previous years, just having star power alone is not enough to win a championship. We saw it with the Brooklyn Nets, where they had James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Whether you want to blame it on injuries or not, it did not work whatsoever. Let's see, what other teams had fantastic star power? The Thunder, when they went ahead and got Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, they also had star power. Excuse me. But it also wasn't enough to even make it past the first round. So it was just like, not necessarily star power isn't necessarily the move now. You need competent role players in each and every spot. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to end up being championship favorites, but obviously, when you have LeBron on the team, regardless of the age, you are definitely going to be a championship favorite. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Is it realistic, though, that they can actually land LeBron? I really don't know. I mean, they're going to be way over the second apron if they do, because, they're going to have to pay Steph and they're going to have to pay LeBron, not to mention the contract that they're already paying Draymond Green. So, and also, I read somewhere that if LeBron is going to get traded, his son is going to get traded along with him. So, it's like, could they do it? I don't really think they can. I don't think they have enough assets, which is why I think that the Jimmy Butler trade it seems a little bit more realistic than, it seems to be a little bit more realistic than the LeBron trade, if it does end up happening. I just don't see LeBron getting traded. LeBron has never gotten traded in the history of his entire career. Jimmy Butler, on the other hand, it does seem like a more realistic option. And it looks like he's already ready to get traded. I mean, look at that. He's got blue dreads right now, or blue braids, whatever you want to call it. And it looks like, the Warriors, they do wear blue, but there were also some talks about the Dallas Mavericks trying to go ahead and pick him up. So we'll see where Jimmy Butler lands at the end of the season. John S. is in the chat. Is the Yankees getting Tucker? I have no idea, but I will say that without Juan Soto, it does seem like they're going to need a little bit more help. And they do, not paying Juan Soto is also freeing up a lot of money in their cap space. So there is a solid chance, but I don't see them, I haven't seen a report saying that that's who they're going to pursue. Would not be surprised if that's who they end up, if they end up making a move like that. But I'll let you guys know. I'll let you know, when the move actually happens. It is a little bit quiet right now in the MLB after Juan Soto just completely stabbed me in the heart and ruined my hopes and dreams. And yeah, I really don't want to talk about that. And not only that, but Jimmy Butler, going back to the NBA topic, Jimmy is also open to trade to a contender, and his list was starting with the Rockets, the Mavs, or the Golden State Warriors. And of those three teams, the Rockets and Warriors have the most interesting trade packages for Miami. So the Warriors, they do have competition in trying to get Jimmy, but I'm sure they could definitely land him. It seems like a much more realistic option. So that's all that I have in this first segment. Now we're going to go ahead and go into the second segment, where I recap the games from last night. These were NBA quarterfinal games of the NBA Cup, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about that right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned if you guys are interested.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to talk about the NBA quarterfinal games that took place yesterday. And there were only two of them, and one from the Eastern Conference, one from the Western Conference, respectively, and we're going to talk about them. Before that, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, or whether it's just, something that you're dying to share. We're all ears, and if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Or you can use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show and makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this second segment, which is going to be talking about the NBA quarterfinals in the NBA Cup. And like I said before, these games were Eastern Conference, Western Conference, respectively. So we might as well go ahead and cover up that is not who played. There we go. We might as well go ahead and cover up the Eastern Conference and their matchup between Ju Pau Gasol is in the chat. How's it going? Just talking about the NBA Cup right now. And the Bucks matched up against the Orlando Magic. This was the first matchup for the Eastern Conference and the first game of the NBA quarterfinals for this season. It's really difficult because I don't know if I should call it NBA Cup quarterfinals or just NBA quarterfinals, because it might confuse a couple of people where it's NBA quarterfinals, usually that's playoffs, right? As opposed to but I don't know. It's very confusing. It's very, very confusing. But I'm gonna call it the NBA Cup quarterfinals just because it avoids the confusion. But the Bucks, they ended up matching up against the Orlando Magic, and the Magic, they did not have Franz Wagner. They did not have Paolo Banchero, but they were still able to make this game rather competitive. In fact, it was so competitive that it took Damian Lillard hitting 2 clutch 3-pointers to win the game in the end for Milwaukee. So I think that's a little bit, concerning on Milwaukee's side, because it's this game should never have been competitive. A team led by Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo going up against an Orlando Magic team that does not have its 2 best players, it should not be this competitive. But it was, and it ended up being competitive, and it ended up coming down to the wire. I don't know, what's going on in Milwaukee, but it is nothing good. The only players that have really been consistent for Milwaukee are Bobby Portis, Damian Lillard, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know what it is, but Darvin Ham needs to stop playing Taurean Prince. I don't know what is wrong with Darvin Ham, but he just it's almost as if Darvin Ham has a crush on Taurean Prince, because he keeps giving him these minutes. He played 20 minutes in this game, and he dropped 0 points, 2 rebounds, and 1 assist, and 1 steal. How is a player like that worth playing for 20 minutes? It doesn't make sense to me. And he's it genuinely this was a problem with him on the Lakers as well. And now it's a problem on the Bucks. This game should have never been competitive, especially when Giannis is dropping 37 points and Damian Lillard is dropping 28 points. Giannis went 15 for 24 from the field in this game, and Dame went 8 for 15, with Bobby Portis dropping 22 and going 9 for 11. Everyone else was disgusting. Chris Middleton played awful in this matchup, by the way. 0 for 2, 0 points in this game. It's not been looking good. He also came off the bench in this matchup, but also, he came off the bench over Taurean Prince. Are we serious right now? Seriously. But aside from complaining about Darvin Ham and his suggestions, as well as Doc Rivers and his coaching suggestions, the Bucks, they ended up winning. Darvin Ham is undefeated in the NBA In-Season Tournament and the NBA Cup. And now they're going to move on to play it's one of 2 teams. It's either going to be the Knicks or it's going to be the Hawks. We're going to have to see who wins in that matchup later on today. But this game should have never been close. This game shouldn't have been close if you're Milwaukee. Not having not having to worry about Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner, and still this game was really close. It really shows exactly where this Milwaukee Bucks team is. And it shows how talented the Orlando Magic really are as a team. Jalen Suggs ended the game with 32 points, 9 rebounds, and 4 steals. And there was also the center Goga Bitadze. Forgive me, Bitadze. That name is really weird to pronounce. Forgive me if I messed up that name, but I think it's Bitadze because the D and the Z is like right next to each other. So that's what really messed me up. He ended the game with 12 points and 14 rebounds. Wendell Carter Jr., 8 points, 11 rebounds. Not really all that impressive, but the real scoring really came off of the bench with Anthony Black, who ended the game with 17 points. And there was also Mortis Wagner, who ended the game with 13 points. Not to be confused with Mo Wagner. And, I mean, Jalen Suggs having 32 points in this matchup was very, very surprising. And the fact that, so just imagine if only Franz Wagner was on this team. If Franz Wagner wasn't injured, I genuinely think that the Orlando Magic would have won in this matchup. And definitely would have thought that if Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner were in this game, they would have easily beaten the Bucks. No questions about it. I will say, though, maybe Paolo Banchero would have had a little bit more of a difficult time scoring against Giannis Antetokounmpo because we know how amazing Giannis is at defense, and they both play the power forward position. So that might have been the only mismatch there for the Orlando Magic if Paolo was playing, but aside from that, I think they would have won this matchup if he was. But next matchup was between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Dallas Mavericks. The Thunder ended up destroying the Mavericks 118-104, and the Thunder aren't even a healthy team. They still don't have Chet Holmgren after losing him to an injury that's most likely going to sideline him for 8 weeks. They still were able to win thanks to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander proving to everyone that he is most likely the best point guard in all of the NBA. He ended with 39 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists, and he scored more points than Kyrie Irving as well as Luka Doncic. Luka ended this game with 16 points and 11 rebounds. He shot absolutely horrible from the field, 5 for 15, and Kyrie ended with 17 points and 5 assists. And SGA completely outplayed both of those guards in this matchup. Anthony Manzano's in the chat. If Miami trade Jimmy Butler during the deadline with Jonathan Kuminga, perfect replacement. I mean, that does seem like a realistic option. I really don't think the Miami Heat are going to take Jonathan Kuminga, considering how they already have Bam Adebayo at center, and having running that small ball lineup with Jonathan Kuminga at the forward. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to work, but I mean, we'll see how it works in the end. I think they're going to have to add a couple more than just Jonathan Kuminga, maybe some draft picks and maybe another player than just Jonathan Kuminga in order to get Jimmy Butler. But again, would not be surprised if they end up landing him. I do know that it would be much smarter for the for the Miami Heat to trade Jimmy Butler and not do what the Los Angeles Clippers did, which was let Paul George walk and not acquire any sort of picks or acquire any sort of players in exchange for Paul George. Because it seemed like Paul George was going to leave the Clippers after that year, and now it seems like Jimmy Butler is going to leave the Miami Heat. It would make much more sense for Miami to not let him walk and to trade him just to make sure that they can gain some sort of pieces. That's just me. That's the way I see it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But back to this Mavericks matchup between the Mavericks and the Thunder. SGA just completely outplayed Luka Doncic in this game. I see really no arguments for SGA not being the best point guard in the NBA. I mean, it makes sense for him to be the best point guard. It totally makes sense for him to be the best point guard in the NBA, just based off of this one performance. And it was incredible. The way that he played, the 39 points, it was also a rather efficient 39 points, 15 for 23 from the field. I mean, it's SGA. We all know what he does. Jalen Williams, he ended with 18 points, was 8 for 21. And, I mean, the rest of the team, they weren't all that. And think about it. This team wasn't playing at its best, and they were still able to win by double-digit points. And they're not even at their best because they were injured and they don't have Chet Holmgren. This Thunder team is going to be deadly in the future. And really, in my opinion, the biggest reason why they actually lost to the Dallas Mavericks in the postseason was because of their lack of experience. I mean, SGA was really the only player on the Thunder who looked like he wanted to play basketball, and he completely outplayed Luka Doncic in that matchup. So the lack of experience just got the better of OKC. Now that they're experienced, I don't really see many Western Conference teams that are going to be able to beat them. I mean, they're still winning even without Chet Holmgren, and they're doing it really, really easily. And it's amazing. Now, Klay Thompson was surprisingly the team's best scorer, and he ended the game going 7 for 14 and 5 for 10 from 3, a perfectly balanced 50%. Again, leading scorer. The fact that he was able to lead the team in scoring over Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic is a little bit concerning, but I mean, what can you do about it? So that's all that I can really say about these matchups. Again, very surprised with the outcome against the Magic and the Milwaukee Bucks. I knew the Bucks were going to win, but I didn't think the game was going to be as close as it was. And I'm also rather surprised with how poorly the Mavericks ended up playing in this NBA Cup quarterfinal. It should also be noted that these games do not count towards team record, if I remember correctly, and the only games that counted towards team record were the actual group play, and not these games. But regardless, they have to play extra games, which means they're going to most likely wear themselves out. Luckily, they're not going to play another game until probably the end of this week. I don't see them on the schedule for Friday, and I don't see them... they're going to play on Saturday, and that's basically it. That's going to be the next game that they end up playing. And again, they're not going to really play as many games throughout the week because, they don't want to... That would be a little bit unfair. I mean, imagine if you're the Thunder or even if you're the Knicks or the Hawks or something like that, you have to play the NBA Cup quarterfinals later today, and then you have to go and play a back-to-back game that actually counts for the regular season. I think that's a little bit too straining for them, so it makes sense that they're not really going to be playing that. So that's all that I have to say on this second segment. Now we're going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I talk about Chris Paul passing up Jason Kidd. See what I did there with the passing? In assists, and I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we're back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about Chris Paul and his recent accolade where he passed up Jason Kidd in all-time assists. And we're just going to go right ahead into this segment. So now Chris Paul is second all-time in total assists in NBA history. And the only player that's above him now is John Stockton. And John Stockton has around 3,000 more assists than Chris Paul. So not only does that show the display and talent of John Stockton, but I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous how Stockton is still like 3,000 assists higher than Chris Paul. Will that record ever be broken? Not entirely sure, but I will say that everyone in the NBA, every NBA fan and everyone did not expect anyone to pass Ray Allen in three-pointers made, and nobody expected, I can guarantee you, nobody expected anyone to pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in all-time points per game, not all-time points per game, in all-time points period in NBA history. Yet LeBron did. So I will say that while it does seem a little bit unlikely for John Stockton to ever get passed up in total assists, I will say it's not impossible. Like, records are meant to be broken. And even in the NFL, where Saquon Barkley is on pace and Derrick Henry is on pace to breaking the all-time leading rushing yards record in an NFL season. Now, granted, they do get an extra game, so a lot of people like to put an asterisk on it, but the point still stands. Records are meant to be broken, and with how the NBA is advancing, with how the NFL is also advancing in player treatment, player training, and all of those things, chances are that there's going to be one point guard or there's going to be somebody in the NBA that ends up passing John Stockton. In fact, in my opinion, if there was anybody in the current NBA right now that could pass Stockton, I think it would be Trae Young, because Trae Young, ever since he stepped foot into the league, he has been top 5 in assists per game, and he's, at the very least, there have been numerous seasons where he's actually top 3 in assists per game. So he's definitely on pace, and he's definitely one of the best passing point guards that this league has ever seen. One of the most underrated passing point guards, in my opinion. People, when they talk about Trae Young, they really talk about his inefficiencies in shooting the ball. They never talk about his playmaking and how incredible it is. And a lot of people, they like to overrate Tyrese Halliburton and his playmaking, when I think Trae Young is just the better point guard, the better passer, the better scorer, the better everything than Halliburton. But back to Chris Paul. Jason Kidd, he had 12,091 assists in his career, and now Chris Paul, he has 12,000, at least at this point, I believe, 12,099 assists in his career. And the fact, he is a phenomenal point guard. Chris Paul is, without a doubt, despite the fact that he doesn't have a ring, he is, without a doubt, in my opinion, one of the best point guards in the history of the NBA. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. He's been an NBA All-Star for 12 seasons. He's been All-NBA 4 times, All-NBA First Team 4 times, All-NBA Second Team 5 times, and All-NBA Third Team 2 times. He's been an All-Defensive player in the NBA. He's done it 7 times. He's been All-Defensive First Team, and he did it 2 times being All-Defensive Second Team. He is a Rookie of the Year. He's been an NBA season assist leader 5 times in 2008, 2009, 2014, 2015, as well as 2022. He's also been an NBA steals leader 6 times, including 2008, 2009, 2011, through 2014. He's been named to the NBA's 75th anniversary team. He has 2 Olympic gold medals, and he was also the first player in NBA history to record 20,000 points and 10,000 assists back in 2021. Obviously, he's not the only player to record that, because LeBron James exists, but he was the first to ever reach that milestone. And in my opinion, this is actually a little bit of a hot take, but if I was picking between Russell Westbrook or Chris Paul to lead my team and be the starting point guard, I would pick Chris Paul. Like, hands down, I would go ahead and pick Chris Paul. A lot of people, they're going to be like, oh, but Chris Paul, he's a playoff choker. Well, what has Russell Westbrook done in the postseason that's no different than what Chris Paul has done in the postseason? Russell Westbrook has only made 1 final, similar to how Chris Paul only made 1 finals. Russell Westbrook has also blown several series where his team is the favorite. He did that in 2017 as well as in 2018. And in 2019, when he had, well, maybe not so much in 2017, now that I think about it, maybe more so in 2018 and 2019, when he had Carmelo Anthony and Paul George. I mean, a lot of people, they like to say that Paul George and Carmelo Anthony weren't playing well in Game 6 against the Utah Jazz in 2018, but Russell Westbrook ended with 46 points on 43 shots. I know 46 points is 46 points, but when you're taking that many shots, you should have at the very least 70 points. Devin Booker took that many shots, and he ended with 70. Kobe Bryant took that many shots, and he ended with 81. And we saw Damian Lillard and Donovan Mitchell score 70 points at one point as well. I believe they were taking way fewer shots than Russell Westbrook did in that game. And, I mean, yeah, Chris Paul, he's not very good in the postseason. I don't know what it is about Chris Paul in the postseason. You look at his numbers and they look great, but he has those one or two performances where it's like, it's a very important game, but he ultimately ends up playing bad in those performances, and it flips the series in favor of the opposing team. And while I will say that is inexcusable, I would much rather have Chris Paul on the team than Russell Westbrook. Chris Paul is less turnover prone. He's much more of a point guard than Russell Westbrook is, and to be honest, I see a lot more value in a point guard averaging an efficient 20 points per game along with 10 plus assists as opposed to a point guard that's just, averaging 25 points, getting 10 plus assists, and getting 10 plus rebounds. Leave the rebounds for the centers. I see much value in Chris Paul. He makes his teammates better. He also clearly makes the team better. And the team goes from being a losing team to a winning team the second Chris Paul joins the roster. Not to mention Chris Paul has much better longevity than Russell Westbrook does. So I would much rather have Chris Paul leading my team as opposed to Russell Westbrook. That's just a hot take. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about that. But leading or being top 2 in all-time assists it's not that easy. Not only do you have to be really good at surveying the court, but you also have to your teammates also have to make those shots. And, it's down to actually having the talent as well as having some sort of luck on your side with your teammate making the shot. And I mean, he's just a phenomenal point guard. There's really, he even has the nickname Point God for a reason, and he's by far one of the best point guards in the history of basketball. And I mean, let me know in the comments what you guys think about Chris Paul passing Jason Kidd. Do you guys think Chris Paul is ever going to win a ring? I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunate as it is, but with that out of the way, we can go into the short break and then get into this next segment. The fourth segment is going to be talking about the Fourth segment is going to be talking about the NBA Cup and the matchups that are going to happen later on tonight. I'm going to go ahead and give off some of my predictions for these games. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be looking at some of my predictions for the games that are going to be taking place tonight. There's only going to be 2 games happening tonight because these 2 games are important for the NBA Cup, the In-Season Tournament. And it's going to be Western Conference and Eastern Conference teams that are going to be playing on that day. Today, I should say, not on that day. And the first game that we are going to talk about is the Knicks and their matchup against the Hawks. Now, the Knicks, they're going to have, I think the Knicks are going to have home field advantage in this matchup. I think they are. I'm not entirely sure because the Bucks, I think it's going to be, I think that's how it's going to work. I'm not entirely sure who gets home field advantage, but considering how the Knicks, they hold the wild card spot, it would be a little bit odd for them to get home field advantage as opposed to the Hawks. But, regardless, the Knicks, they do have a much better team record than the Hawks. So maybe that's what determines the team that gets home field advantage. Again, this is relatively new, so I'm not entirely sure. But regardless, the Hawks, they're going to have to play the Knicks, and we all know the beef with Atlanta and the Knicks. Knicks fans to this day are still screaming F Trae Young, and they do not like Trae Young. For those of you guys who haven't been keeping up with basketball, in 2021, Trae Young ended up eliminating the Knicks from the playoffs. This was the first time that the Knicks actually made the playoffs. And while I will say that Julius Randle played absolutely awful in that series, Trae Young silenced the entirety of the crowd. And in game one, Trae Young ended up hitting this floater, and it just destroyed every single Knicks fan's heart. And he was, afterwards, he was like, it's quiet in here, all that stuff. And really, it's like, the Knicks and the Knicks fans, they did not like him at all after that. They absolutely despised him. And to this day, they're still screaming F Trae Young, F Trae Young. They do not like Trae Young at all. And now they're going to match up in an NBA Cup. They're probably going to play in Madison Square Garden. I would not be surprised if Trae Young ends up getting booed out of his mind in this game. And that kind of scares me because I have the Knicks winning this game, but I would not be surprised if Trae Young just decides to go off. Like, he has done that before against the Knicks, and he's beaten the Knicks several times, and he loves hearing the criticism. He loves hearing those overrated chants. He loves hearing those, you're not like, the trash talking. He loves the banter, and he's one of those players where it's like, if you get him going and you really get him upset, he is going to ball out. And that's sort of what really scares me from picking the Knicks in this matchup. Especially, not to mention the Knicks and their history of choking and losing in games where they should have won. So it's also really difficult to play in Madison Square Garden as a Knick, in my opinion. Like, it's one of the most difficult places to actually play because there's no doubt in my mind that Trae Young is going to try and have the best game of his life playing in the Garden. And that's really sort of hesitant. That's really making me hesitate on picking the Knicks and winning this game. But on paper, I genuinely think that this Knicks team has a much better roster than this Atlanta Hawks team. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns has already proven, he's already got a nickname, Bodega Cat. Because, there's a bunch of bodegas over in New York and a bunch of Dominicans, because Karl Anthony Towns is Dominican. They all have those bodegas. And that's why he sort of got that nickname. And he's been very good. He's been very good with the Knicks, and the team as a whole has been fantastic. In fact, there are only two players in the Eastern Conference right now that I believe are averaging 25 plus points on 45% efficiency, and those two players are Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. So this team is very dangerous. This team has a lot of chemistry, and I think overall the lineup and the matchups that they have are a lot better suited to go up against the Hawks. So if I were to, I'm sticking with my gut, and I'm going to go ahead and pick the Knicks in this one, but I would not be surprised if Trae Young goes off and has one of the best games of his life against the Knicks in this game. Now, the next matchup, the Warriors, they're going up against the Houston Rockets. Now, if you guys remembered from the previous prediction that I did, I thought that the Houston Rockets were going to beat the Warriors, but the last time that happened was when Russell Westbrook was on Houston. And the reality is that this Warriors team has owned this Houston Rockets team for years. But I'm going to be stubborn, and I'm going to go ahead and pick Houston again to win this game. I think now is the time. If there was any time for them to win a game against the Golden State Warriors, it would be right now in this big game. I think the Houston Rockets, they are a much better team than the Golden State Warriors, and like overall they have better players. Steph Curry could go off in this game, which also it's really like most of my predictions for today, they're really streaky. It's really like I want to pick them, but at the same time I could totally see them losing, if that makes sense. And with the Golden State Warriors, they have Steph Curry, who's arguably a better shooter than Trae Young and a much more efficient shooter than Trae Young. This season, you can make the argument that maybe they're roughly the same, but again, it's still Steph Curry, so it's like, you can't really argue with the greatest shooter of all time. And if there was, like I said, if there was any time for the Houston Rockets to beat the Golden State Warriors, it would be now. They have home field advantage, I believe, in this game. This game starts at 9:30, and again, I think they have a much better roster than the Golden State Warriors. It's just they're going to have to be fighting against a little bugaboo where they have been unable to beat the Golden State Warriors for the last few years. And I'm still going to be stubborn, and I'm going to stick with my gut, and I'm going to go ahead and pick Houston in this matchup. I was right for the last two matchups in the NBA In-Season Tournament in those cup games. I thought that the Bucks were going to win, and I also thought that the Thunder were going to win. I ended up being right both times. So I'm looking to go ahead and continue that streak in these two games. So hopefully I can stay right. Hopefully the Knicks end up winning, and hopefully the Houston Rockets end up winning in this matchup. Now, any players that have been injured, I do not see an injury report, and obviously, like, with the way that injuries work, most of the time it's like we don't really get a green light up until like when the game starts. Like, most of the time there would be players who are either load managing or they have minor injuries, and they will not get cleared up until, like, you know, almost near tip off. So it's like not entirely sure whether or not some players are going to be injured in this matchup. Also not entirely sure if that's going to affect any of the results in these games. But with that being said, those are my predictions, and that's really all that I have to say in this fourth segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the fifth segment, where we talk about the Jets getting eliminated from the playoffs again. And I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to tune in if you guys are interested. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. In this fifth segment, we're going to talk about the Jets getting eliminated from the postseason again. And I know what you guys are thinking. Why is this news? The Jets get eliminated every single year. This is like, it's not breaking news that the Jets don't make the postseason. In fact, they have missed the postseason for 14 consecutive seasons. This is the longest streak in the NFL, and it is also longer than any current playoff drought in both the NBA, the NHL, the MLB, and in the WNBA. This is the largest playoff drought in the history of American sports as of right now. Like, you know, actually, I did not say that right at all. The longest playoff drought currently in American sports. That's more grammatically correct. But it's not really, again, so it's not really news that the Jets end up not making the playoffs. What I think is really embarrassing news, at least in my opinion, was how somehow the Jets in this season, they have a worse record with Aaron Rodgers than when after getting rid of Zach Wilson. Like, this team was a perennial playoff team, and the only thing that was stopping them from making the postseason was Zach Wilson. In the last 2 years, in 2022 and in 2023, this team had a record of 7-10. They won games in spite of their quarterback play. Now they get a Hall of Fame quarterback, and they're arguably worse than the last season. Again, there's a very small chance that they could end up winning out in the last 4 weeks, and they ultimately get the same record as what they had with Zach Wilson. But judging by how this season has gone for the Jets, it's been incredibly disappointing. I believe in this season they've had 5 games where they've held the lead in the fourth quarter, but they blew that lead because their defense let them down. Whether it's an Aaron Rodgers thing or whether it's just a Jets thing, it's unbelievable. It's ridiculous to me how this team ends up playing way worse with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback than what they did with Zach Wilson. It's incredible how bad they are. It's incredible. Like, really, the breaking news would be the Jets actually making the playoffs if that ever does happen. But the last time that the Jets made the playoffs was after the 2010 season when head coach Rex Ryan and quarterback Mark Sanchez led them to their second consecutive AFC championship game. And it's only been downhill from there. So ever since the arrival of Aaron Rodgers, everyone, and every Jets fan and every fan of the NFL expected immediate success. But then Aaron Rodgers immediately gets hurt and just completely destroys the idea. Not a problem. He's going to be back the next season. Here he is, and he's playing absolutely awful. Now, I'm not going to say that it's Aaron Rodgers' fault that this team did not make the playoffs, because there are several other things wrong with this Jets team that they did not have a problem with in previous years. Now those problems seem to be rearing those ugly heads, and it's also been a reason why they've ended up losing. Their special teams has been bad. Their kicker has been bad. The defense late in games has also been bad. There have been way more reasons than just Aaron Rodgers for the reasoning as to why they are a bad team. It's just very surprising how now that they have a good quarterback, now they're struggling with all of the other things that they were doing so well in seasons prior. And it goes back to my rule. It is absolutely illegal for the Jets to have a good quarterback. If they have a good quarterback, the world is ending. It is completely illegal for the Jets to have one. But ever since the arrival with Aaron Rodgers last season, it was supposed to change things, but then he got hurt. But regardless, they ended the season 7-10. Not good, but for having Zach Wilson as your quarterback, that's pretty solid. Again, pretty solid for having Zach Wilson as your quarterback. Now, with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, going 3-10 is almost inexcusable. The roster is in much worse shape, both because of Rodgers' own salary cap, as well as personal moves that they made to sort of like, it seems like those moves were made to try and appease Aaron Rodgers, bringing in Packer legends and bringing in players from the Packers, whether it's good or whether it's bad, it's starting to prove like it's been a bad move to sort of listen to Aaron Rodgers. But again, when you have a quarterback like him with the resume that he has, you would want to appease him. But it doesn't really seem like it's really leading to any sort of wins. So there's not much of a reason for any Jets fans to be optimistic about them next year either. Now, they'll have a new coach and most likely a new quarterback. Not entirely sure if they will. Again, most likely, I don't think that's going to happen. And they might begin to rebuild again. And it could get the franchise back into the postseason, hopefully in less than 14 years. But this is disgusting. And it's really, I can't really talk because, being a Giants fan, it's also really disappointing being a Giants fan. But at the very least, we have one playoff appearance in the last couple of years in 2022, and surprisingly, that was with Daniel Jones, who in my opinion is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. In fact, probably the worst quarterback in NFL history to ever have a starting job for over 6 years. In fact, not probably, definitely the worst quarterback to have a starting job for the last 6 years. For over 6 years, I should say. Excuse me. But regardless, we got rid of him, and now we are finally, hopefully, the Giants are finally going to integrate and have a black quarterback, and either it'll be Shador or it'll be Cam, and we will be back in the playoffs. In a perfect world, that's what's going to happen. But with the Jets, it doesn't really seem like they're going to be living in a perfect world, especially with Aaron Rodgers and all of his money that he's making in this season. Now, we don't even know if Aaron Rodgers is going to retire. He doesn't know if he's going to retire next season. He doesn't know if he's going to come back and play for the Jets. But I think I speak for a majority of Jets fans that say they want Aaron to retire. I think I speak for a majority of them. But there's a lot of problems with this team than just Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, he's almost always going to find a way to tell people it's not his fault, which is one thing that I don't really like about Aaron. I love Aaron as a quarterback. I think he is one of the best quarterbacks that the NFL has ever seen. He has one of the best arm talents that the NFL has ever seen. I actually think he is one of the most unluckiest quarterbacks in NFL history, in my opinion. And I'll give a little bit of an example why. I might do that I might actually talk about that in the tomorrow segment, talking about some of Aaron Rodgers' most unlucky moments in the postseason. But I will say that, in my opinion, like, he has had several unlucky moments. One of the more unlucky moments that I can remember was the playoff matchup against the Seahawks, the playoff matchup against the Cardinals, their playoff matchup against the New York Giants. Actually, we'll talk about the Giants one because I love talking about my Giants winning. It's the one thing that I can enjoy, just reliving the past. But 2011, Aaron Rodgers and the number one ranked offense, I mean, they were ridiculous. They were absolutely phenomenal in that year. Their defense wasn't that great, but again, the offense was so high powered that it didn't even matter how bad the defense was. And it's like, looking at their defense now, they were really, really bad, but like, the offense was so good that it completely masked the bad defense, right? And all of it was because of Aaron Rodgers. He won the NFL MVP in that year, and in my opinion, no other quarterback had a more competent year at MVP than Aaron. It's one of the best MVP seasons for a quarterback by far. And then came the postseason, where they matched up against the New York Giants. And basically what happened was the New York Giants waltzed into Lambeau Field and kicked the Packers to the curb. That's exactly what happened. But the defense let up 37 points in that game. And letting up 37 points in a home playoff game is inexcusable, especially when 7 of those points came from a Hail Mary pass to end the half. Like, it was incredibly unlucky for Aaron Rodgers, and in that game, like, this was the first game where Aaron Rodgers actually looked like a mortal quarterback, because throughout the majority of the regular season, he looked like he was on a completely different level than every other NFL athlete. But that one game, he played a bit mediocre. He played a bit mediocre in that game. But I mean, the entirety of the game, it was unfair. I mean, another matchup that I remember was the Aaron Rodgers' matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Tom Brady was on the team. Yes, we're bringing up Tom Brady and his luck again. We're going to do it. But essentially, this was an extremely winnable game for Green Bay, but of course the defense let up, and there were several miscues and mess-ups in this game that robbed Rodgers, in my opinion, of winning a game that he definitely played well enough to win. So, for starters, Kevin King gave up 14 points, 2 touchdowns, with his awful defense. He mistimed a jump on the first touchdown that Tom Brady threw, and then he let little Scotty Miller score a touchdown on the final play of the first half, where the only thing that he had to do was just keep the defender in front of him because it was a Hail Mary, and then he ended up selling the game with a pass interference on a throw that Brady just, completely ducked. Like, he airmailed that. He threw it to Casper. But not only that, like, everyone knew that the Packers secondary and, like, the defense was a weak point for the Packers. But what was really surprising was how the rest of the players on the Packers let them down. Aaron Jones was terrible in that game. He committed 2 fumbles, and all-pro wide receiver Davante Adams ended up dropping a touchdown pass, which would have tied the game 14. Now, for Aaron Rodgers, he was fantastic in that game, despite what naysayers might say. He threw for 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns, and his only interception in that game was on a play where there was obvious holding, and it just wasn't called. The Packers' offensive line was completely overwhelmed, collapsing at the worst times, giving Rodgers no protection to throw the ball. And, of course, Tom Brady in this matchup won the conference championship game where he played terrible. He ended the game throwing 3 interceptions, and he probably should have ended with 4 or 5 interceptions in this game, but of course he didn't because the Packers want to drop a couple of interceptions. In fact, There was one play where a Packers linebacker ended up dropping an absolute gift of an interception before the Scotty Miller touchdown. And let's see, what else did he get lucky with? He threw 3 touchdowns, but one of them was from a pass that Kevin King should have swatted. And then the third touchdown pass that he threw was to a wide open tight end with multiple linemen down the field. It should have been a penalty, but of course it wasn't called. And surprisingly, in this game, even as someone who doesn't like Brady, I've rarely seen Tom Brady as careless with the ball as he was in the second half. Like, he was incredibly careless, giving the Packers several chances to win the game, but of course they did not. And one other thing that I just could not understand was how the Packers, they were in the red zone in the fourth quarter of the game, but they decided to take a field goal. Like, when are you going to stop coaching like a little girl and just go for it? Like, be a man and go for it. Like, I don't understand why they ended up not going for it. This was the same problem that they had against the Seahawks, where, while I will say Aaron Rodgers did not play well at all in that matchup, it was very unlucky for him in the end, because not only does he lead the team on a game-tying drive to send it into overtime, but he never got to touch the ball again. Like, at all. In fact, in every single postseason performance that Aaron Rodgers has played in, he led a game, when he led a game-tying drive, in every single playoff performance that he played where he led a game-tying drive, he never, ever got to touch the ball again. Never. Which is, like, it's unbelievable how he never got to touch the ball, and how it happened so many times where he never got to touch the ball in overtime. But that just shows how the defenses, particularly with the Jets now, it just shows how Aaron's teams and his defenses, they let him down with the games and the balance. This is a similar thing that happened with Dan Marino as well as Peyton Manning. Did not happen to Tom Brady, of course. It also happened to Drew Brees, but that's besides the point. Anyways, this Jets team, just incredibly unlucky, incredibly unbelievable just how bad they've been. And it's not entirely Rodgers' fault, but I'm not going to say that Rodgers was entirely perfect. But, you know, just a couple of moments where Aaron was rather unlucky. And this, in turn, it was very unlucky. Because, again, it's like this Jets team, they were in a position where it was like all they needed was a competent quarterback, and they would able to... and the expectation was that they would make it over the top, similar to how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all they needed was a competent quarterback to get them over the top and end up winning a Super Bowl, and part of the reason why Brady decided to join Tampa Bay. But ultimately, it ended up not working in his favor, and this does not help Aaron Rodgers and his career. But that's all that I have to say in this final segment, and that's it for the show. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, or something that you're just dying to share. We're all ears, and if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then you can use Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box. If Super Chat's not really your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or helps the show. It really doesn't matter what you do. That is all that I have for today on this final segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that